Deluge. Hello again. Thank you for being here with me once more. I hope you are very well today. I am Marie. Welcome to my channel. This information can be seen as science fiction, or as the viewer sees best, and I post it for entertainment purposes only. Still, I take my information very seriously, and for whoever has eyes to see. I am writing this on the morning of October 30th, 2024. Before I continue, this is me with my tin foil hat again. Although what I am going to say is logical from my point of view, I have no proof of this, and I came to the conclusion I will share with you today, connecting as many dots as I can, as many bits of data as I could find. Yet, as this is a theory, I could change my mind later on in future videos, and as the result of better information coming in, because as I have said before, we must always believe what is true with the best information available, yet we must be willing to change our point of view on whatever subject when better information comes in. Perhaps I should wait to gather more information before presenting it to all of you. The problem is that I am somewhat at a dead end with this, because there is nowhere to get more information or evidence, not on Earth and not off planet, so at least for now, what I have is what I have. Most of the information I connect here today comes from Earth, yet I constantly contrast it with official Galactic Federation data about Earth and its history, and this is where things start turning interesting for me as it mostly coincides with the official version of Earth's history and past. As we have quite a lot of evidence that points out that the Earth's past wasn't as we are told, then we can see here that the imposition of made-up false history comes from all the way up, from the controllers of Earth, the Galactic Federation. Now we have another problem with dates in general, because so many of them simply do not coincide, making things even worse. There is a very marked time-slip differential between how time is perceived on other planets and how it is on Earth. The Galactic Federation knows this, and I am quite sure it is using it to confuse and hide real facts from any researcher such as myself, especially because dates and events become extremely hard to locate, especially when trying to set them in a time frame as seen from another planet, such as Tema, in Taygeta that has a strong 4.6:1 ratio time duration, as compared to Earth. That is, for every day in Tema, 4.6 days pass on Earth, even though the perception of the duration of a day in Tema is basically like on Earth. My point is that dates do not coincide, and much less when we compare them to star dates, and this is convenient for whoever may be orchestrating a large social reset, and that would be the Galactic Federation, as no one else has the power to do so. With the time-slip differential problem between other planets and Earth, it is quite impossible to set comparative dates to events on Earth, and this is very convenient for hiding events from other star races, as they can place them in another time frame and context, and make up false history. The evidence we have so far strongly suggests that they have reset society on Earth several times in its history, and they have managed to hide this from observing star races, many of which are Federation members themselves. How would they get away with hiding something as large as a social reset if there are so many star races looking at Earth and everything that is going on there all the time? Would be the question. So far I can see two ways to get away with it. The first is to blame the event that triggered a reset on a natural disaster of a global scale, such as the Universal Deluge. The second is to guide society into a large-scale change gradually, with no global-scale disaster, yet perhaps using smaller, more localized ones with large socio-economic consequences, while also guiding the perception and the values of the general population into believing whatever they want, this with the use of advanced propaganda and mind control mechanisms we are all aware of. I must say another important piece of context information before I can continue to what I really want to say today. This is mostly for the people who have not been following me for long enough. According to Galactic Federation official information, there was once a very large watery planet in this solar system that was placed between Mars and Jupiter, and which was called Tiamat, although some of my information reveals that it was also called Lucifer. As it was a very large water planet, roughly the size of Neptune, it reflected the sun's light like a mirror, making it look like a second sun, thus fueling the idea that persists up to now that this solar system has an elusive binary star. After all, binary star systems are very common. For example, the Pleiadian star Taygeta, Tau-19, with its white dwarf binary star, Sardiklea, or Tau-19b. According to official Galactic Federation data, 12,500 Earth years ago, a war between different Federation factions caused the destruction of planet Tiamat and devastated the surface of its neighboring planet Mars. Tiamat was completely destroyed, and it caused much mayhem on all the other planets of this solar system due to the loss of mass of a large planet, as the equilibrium was broken. As Tiamat was a water planet, mostly covered in oceans, its water floated in space for an undisclosed time, until much of it was attracted by the other planets, thus falling on them. This includes Earth, and it is the official cause of the universal deluge described in the Bible, among countless other ancient documents around the world. Space is a near vacuum, which means that there is no heat transmission. Things cannot radiate their heat, contrary to how Hollywood depicts space, as a place where everything exposed to it gets instantly frozen, and this is false. Things do end up freezing in space, but it takes a very long time, something in the order of thousands of years. This means that Tiamat's water floated in space as blobs, not as ice, until they were finally drawn towards a planet, falling on it as heavy rain, which would flood everything. This is besides the fact that even if Tiamat's water arrived to Earth frozen, the mere contact with its atmosphere and the entry process would be more than enough to convert much of that ice to water, even though much of it would have also converted directly to gas, which would later condense, forming more water. After all this I have said, I can now come to say the important part of this video. Many YouTube channels dedicate a lot of time to the subject of Tartaria, which is one of the biggest information mines available as a subject that indicates that much, if not all of Earth's official history is false. The powers that be have done everything in their power to erase a large, probably global-scale society and/or nation, replacing it with an official Eurocentrical narrative, even when nowadays proof of the existence of Tartaria is overflowing everywhere, making everyone question the official narrative. Connected to the Tartaria subject, we have another undeniable topic that the official version denies, and it is a large number of buried structures, sometimes entire buildings, all over the world, and over which modern-day cities have been built. I don't mean ancient or medieval cities, I mean large modern enough structures that look like they were built sometime in the late 17th century to early 19th. If we connect the dots with other pieces of circumstantial evidence, such as the strangely high number of orphan children during the later part of the 19th century, as well as serious doubts about the existence of historical figures, such as Napoleon, as everything surrounding his life has to do with numerology, among other incongruences, suggests that much of Earth's history of that period was made up by the powers that be. Even though we can argue that all of Earth's official history is false, this period around the so-called Industrial Revolution is especially interesting as the empirical, observable evidence we have strongly contradicts the official narrative. All this leads us to conclude that all the evidence suggests that something big, something of global impact, such as a social, geopolitical reset happened sometime between the years 1775 and 1875, more specifically between the years 1800 and 1850. This is the time many experts rightfully claim that Tartaria was destroyed and expunged from history. The kind of buildings we can see were buried in some kind of superflood event, which some people also call a ground liquefaction event, suggests that they were buried during that period, also because some buildings are still standing and many in use, despite having much of their original architecture buried underground. We can argue that large floods are occurring all over the planet, all the time, and that those buried buildings and portions of others are the result of simply localized floods, where people simply decided to build over what they left behind, rather than try to clear the mud. The problem with this is that the number of buried buildings all over the world, all with the same congruent architecture which places them more or less in the same period, indicates that the mudflow event may have been something more global, rather than just an apparently connected group of flood events. Note as well that most flood events bring a lot of mud to the affected areas, yet hardly enough to completely bury large buildings, or on rare occasions, as the amount of sediment necessary to bury one would be proportional to the amount of water in the area, as it is also connected to the amount of erosion the flood itself caused and displaced towards the affected structures. Connecting the dots, it looks like those global mudflow events, strangely and conveniently adapt to the powers that be, efforts to erase the now undeniable Tartaria. We can easily argue now that those mudflow events that buried entire cities are linked to the destruction of Tartaria, perhaps as part of the mechanisms the powers that be used to attempt to erase it from the history books. All this leads me to strongly suspect that the Great Global Flood may have happened not as long ago as we are led to think. Perhaps the last deluge occurred as recently as 200 years ago, because my data certainly indicates this. Returning to Tiamat and its water spilt into space, it is quite logical to think that it would clump together in large packs of globs, and not necessarily in one single mass of water. Therefore, this would mean that Earth has suffered more than one global deluge event. Perhaps the last one was as recently as 200 years ago. Much of Tiamat's water is still out there in this solar system. Today it is called the asteroid belt, and very few people know that it is made mostly of ice, as dirty snowballs, and not of solid rocks, which are obviously present there as well, as the remnants of the solid parts of the destroyed planet. Then we have the time-slip differential problem, which does not allow us to establish an accurate time frame for any event as related to how time is measured and perceived on other planets. This leads me to strongly suspect that the events that led to the destruction of planet Tiamat may have occurred much more recently than the official 12,500-year time frame. We would have to develop a way to differentiate and then study the effects of each one of the global flood events, because I am quite convinced that there were several ones and not only one large incident. If the water of Tiamat may have traveled through space in groups of blobs, then it would be quite understandable that a large global-scale deluge may have occurred each time Earth passed through a patch in space full of water. The more we research, the more we can conclude that something very big and globally changing event happened around the early 1800s. Perhaps the deluges were physical events that had nothing to do with a purposeful social reset which would include the convenient erasure of Tartaria and all its rich culture. Yet knowing the mentality of the psychopaths in power on Earth, they could have used a natural disaster to their convenience. As they say, and I quote, "Never let a good crisis come to waste." Then I know that there are tons and tons of documents and evidence that back up the official narrative. As many say, Some documents are so precise that we can see how many bags of wheat were produced in each region in Europe during the Middle Ages, sometimes even going as far back as knowing how many sheep lived where in Roman times. I could argue that these are peaks of useless information which are used to validate other false ones. The powers that be certainly do have the power to create a global scale, false narrative complete with documents, golden-lined books and so on. So to the argument that countless documents prove this or that part of the official narrative is correct, I would argue that we are never given the originals, and we are only told that there are those documents, that they exist, but we never have access to them, not on Earth, and not up here with the Galactic Federation, which is nothing other than more government like the one on Earth. We only have the copy of the edited copy of everything, and this includes the Bible, by the way. So inundating modern-day, post-1875 culture with history books does not convince me that they are veridical. I have also noticed an affinity to believe that every old document must be truthful, just because it is old. An example of this is the Sumerian tablets, which make absolutely no sense to me from my point of view of a non-terrestrial Lyrian human experiencing countless stellar societies populated by more human Lyrians just like the ones on Earth. Therefore, for me, the Sumerian tablets can only be yet another example of an attempt to control, belittle and diminish the human spirit for population control. Professional researchers are the ones who are more prone to believe that if some document is old, then it must be true, even more so when they are attacked by their peers, who want to classify everything as ancient folklore and myth. Of course, there may be some truth to those ancient texts, as mixing truth with lies has always been a good method of masking the false parts of a narrative and passing them as facts. Something really big happened 200 years ago, and I strongly believe a global deluge is included in this mix. If there is more data, I will certainly share it with you, but this is what I have so far. Thank you for listening to Tinfoil Hat, Marie Swaruu today. This will be all for now. As always, thank you for watching my video, and for liking, sharing, and subscribing for more. It helps this channel grow a lot. And I hope to see you here next time. With much love and appreciation, your friend, Marie Swaruu.